Hello, everyone. My name is Addam Yekutieli. Um, I work under the artist name of No Hope. Um, and I'm going to speak a little bit about my ongoing projects and kind of a few of my reflections on them. Just to clarify, the artist name that I work under, No Hope, is spelled Know. So it's a bit of a wordplay. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you all today. So without further ado, I'll pull up my presentation. 1 second. So just to give kind of a little background about my work, I'm a visual artist. I work both in the public realm, doing outdoor and public art projects, whether it be murals, different types of interventions in public space, workshops, and longer ongoing processes with different communities and groups and people from different backgrounds, kind of revolving themes of belonging, of national identity, borders. So I'll start kind of with an overview of a few of my projects. The first one is a project called Taking Sides. Taking Sides is a project that deals with territory, the notion of borders, our different perceptions of what borders mean to different people. And the basis of the project is that I draw a line on the ground and write a text on each side. This is kind of like the more classic example. It says our side, their side. And what I do is I create these interventions in public space, and then I just stand to the side and wait around with a camera, and different situations are created organically. And the organic interactions with the artworks create new images and new meanings and new metaphors that kind of present themselves. So nothing is staged, everything is completely natural. This is a piece that I did in Cologne, Germany. And when I was documenting the intervention, then police officers came and asked for documents from what seemed to be foreign workers. This was during the time where a lot of Syrian refugees arrived into Germany, and specifically even more so in Cologne. This is another piece from the same series in Cologne. It reads, our homelands, our sentiments. So what I try to do with my projects is try to take these larger issues such as, whether it be political realities, borders, patriotism, and kind of dissect them and observe them as if they were kind of an emotional or human mechanism. Because I think that helps us understand these realities from a different point of view, a point of view that is very inclusive. It's more intuitive opposed to intellectual. And I think that if we can kind of understand these issues from a personal emotional place, then it can reflect on our larger understanding of our realities and how we participate in these realities. This is another piece from Lyon, France, that says what we believe and what we know. It's outside of a chapel. And so while the first example, our side, their side, kind of is a very clear representation of what borders mean to many people, how there is one side that belongs to us and the other side that belongs to the other. A lot of times I find myself writing texts that don't necessarily exemplify the notion of opposing sides, but more different perceptions of a philosophical notion. So this one obviously corresponds with religion and the notion of truth. This is from Jerusalem. One of the iterations of the project that I did was in Jerusalem, and obviously in a city like that, there's a lot of added baggage. The city is divided. It has still fresh historical scars. So I kind of saw these interventions as kind of interjecting myself into these narratives and trying to divide the city and see how it corresponds with the environment there. This one reads, the stories we tell, the stories they tell. This is also in the old city, right on Via de la Rosa. Reads the lesson taught and the lesson learned. And to the right, you see a Palestinian merchant, and on the left, the Israeli military soldiers that use the same location as a checkpoint. So I thought that kind of, to correspond with the history that took place there, the biblical history, the path that Jesus walked on. So I tried to also correspond with these larger narratives of the place. These pieces are created in a site-specific manner. So I try to kind of touch on all these different elements in these pieces. This is another scene from the same location. I guess there was a pilgrimage of sorts. And so by placing these pieces in public space, then they, like I said before, more meanings and more images are created without my interference. So what I do is I essentially, in this case, I write the text on the ground, draw the line, and then everything kind of is released from my hands. And my intention only matters up to a certain point, because a lot changes once life happens around it. This is the symptom and the underlying issue. And here you see a soldier and a religious man kind of observing together. This is another kind of iteration of the our side, their side. And this again is in Lyon. There weren't too many kind of organic interactions in this with this piece. This one reads the promised land and promised land, and this is right on the border of East Jerusalem, which is Palestinian territory, and it corresponds with the idea of this region or Israel as being the promised land to Jews, but also kind of corresponds with the notions of land theft, which leads to another project of mine called It Took Me Till Now to Find You, in which I collected letters written by Israelis and Palestinians from different backgrounds, different walks of life, different age groups. And I had them write a letter to someone. It didn't have to be someone real. It could have been, it could of course have been written to someone real, but it was kind of meant to be an open-ended letter that deals with the ideas of longing, belonging, of homeland, and kind of like the guiding questions that I gave were, how would you describe your homeland to someone who has never been there, to someone who will never be able to get there? And in these letters, people share different anecdotes and stories kind of about their sentimental and emotional connections to the places that they grew up in, how those places have changed in the period of their life. And so I had a very eclectic kind of group of people that wrote the letters, whether they be Palestinians in refugee camps, conscientious objectors to the Israeli military, settlers, there were religious people, secular people, people that are in the military. So I kind of wanted to get a very eclectic and broad range to kind of show how different people perceive these notions, and for not to be kind of a homogenized portrait. And later what I did is I extracted phrases from each one of the letters, kind of took them out of their original context and made them even more abstract and even more open-ended. And I kind of engraved or scratched them into replicas of the segregation wall, which is a wall that Israel built as a supposed security fence, but it's a very real wall that separates people from, that goes through villages, separating them from their families and limits access and freedom of movement. And I wanted to see what these phrases, how they could be perceived when they're taken out of their original context and placed in a context that is very directly political, but the origin of these texts are from a very personal and sentimental place. Like I said, I've tried to kind of like unpack these more dense political realities and kind of perceive them from a more personal place, because I feel that allows a lot more empathy, and it can feel more relevant to people sometimes. For example, this phrase was written by a bereaved mother to the person that killed her son. This was written by a Holocaust survivor, writing to a childhood friend of hers, as if they had reunited decades later, which didn't happen. Again, these letters were kind of more again, open-ended. They didn't actually have to reach the recipient. And these are the finished artworks. There are about a dozen of these artworks. At the bottom, there are olive tree roots, as if the wall was uprooted, kind of suggesting a kind of a theoretical or hypothetical situation or opportunity to kind of uproot this wall, and also kind of observe the human stories that are at the root of this reality. And this is how the installation looked, how it looked in galleries. This project was shown both in London and in Tel Aviv. And my experience of showing it in different places, in both places, was very different for obvious reasons. But again, the context really changes the way that these works are perceived, how they're understood, and the emotional baggage that the viewer carries while viewing them. Following the concept of borders and lines, this is another project that I did in Jerusalem. It is a building that is right on the Green Line, and it was caught in the crossfire between Jordan, Israel, and Palestinians. So it's full of bullet holes. And what I did was I numbered each one of the bullet holes, and kind of created this index. What I wanted to do with this is take such a dramatic event, such as the Six-Day War, which is the majority of these bullet holes are from the Six-Day War. You know, these historical events are kind of perceived as objective by each side, how there's one narrative that people really stick to and stand by. And by numbering each one of the holes, it kind of personifies and makes each one almost personal. And what I did is I created this index by assigning a sentence or a phrase to each numbered bullet hole. And these texts are kind of, again, different ruminations and reflections and kind of like more poetic phrases that attempt to describe a more personal experience that again is not directly political, but does convey political notions. And for me, this building was a almost like an artifact. It's one of this area has been annexed by Israel since the Six-Day War. It was a Palestinian village, and now it's part of an industrial zone in Jerusalem. So it's kind of like one of the and the rest the surroundings have been either gentrified or they've been industrialized. And this is kind of like one of the last relics that still exist, that are kind of like a testament to that time and the events that happened there. So I wanted to address that and to respect that and to highlight that. And this is kind of another view. I think generally in my work, it's an ongoing process for me of trying to unlearn many things that I was educated on growing up in Israel. I was born in the States and I moved to Israel when I was 10. And I use these projects as a way to understand the reality that surrounds me, how I partake in it, how I reckon with the fact that there are many people living under the occupation of Israel, and how I, as the occupier in this situation, attempt to unlearn these things and kind of acknowledge these events. And by doing these projects, it not only is an eye-opening process for me, but by involving groups of people in these kind of ongoing processes, it allows me to deeper understand the narratives that I have been holding on to, and see them from different points of views. And I think that concludes my presentation. So I want to thank you for tuning in. I'm sorry I couldn't be there again in person, and it seems like a beautiful. I've tuned in sporadically throughout the day, and it seems very engaging and beautiful. So thank you all.